If you want to start to paint in watercolor in 2025, or even restart your journey after a break, you might need encouragement. And if you do, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to paint a painting which is meant to kickstart your painting journey the way I would do it if I was starting to paint in 2025. But first of all, I'm going to share with you a conversation I had with Tamsin, my daughter, about how she would go about starting to learn watercolor in 2025.
So if I was starting watercolor painting again in 2025, I would buy a set of Kuretake paints, and I would buy 2 or 3 brushes and multiple pads or blocks, probably blocks because they're really convenient, but I would buy multiple blocks of different sizes so that I could have multiple paintings on the go. And I wouldn't try to paint anything specific at all to start with. I would do washes in bright colours, and I would layer them with leaves and flowery type things. And I would work on the same painting for as long as I could until I didn't know what else to do with it. And I would treat all of my work as play pieces with no expectations of what I was actually aiming to achieve. And I would just enjoy colour.
So now we're going to start on a painting, or 2 or 3 or 4. And we're going to get started now looking at paper first of all. Tamsin mentioned how when she starts to learn to paint again, she would like to start off with blocks of paper of various sizes. And I think this is an important investment which beginners often overlook, because it's much more than just the quality of the paper that counts, whether or not it's expensive or inexpensive, but also the size of the paper that you're going to use, the format, and that is to say whether it's a block or a pad or whatever, or loose sheets, and of course the availability. So I've got here some Meeden blocks which are now available in many sizes. We've got 5x7, which everybody should have some of this size, because it's very handy if you just want to dash off a quick painting. Perhaps you're doing one of our challenges or something like that. You don't want to use a big piece of paper. I use this size ever such a lot. It comes in hot press, cold press, and rough, and I use all 3 of those. To be honest, if price is a consideration, go for Meeden rather than any of the other 100% cotton ones, because this is very reasonable for a block, because a block of paper is always more expensive than loose sheets, obviously, because it's much more convenient. And there's more work in it because it's got a nice solid cardboard backing, so it doesn't bend. When you're painting on it, when you put water on paper, it always buckles, doesn't it? So, I recommend this. I use it for all of my tutorials. And I do use all 3 surfaces. To be quite honest, if I was starting from scratch, I'd buy myself a dozen of these, and some probably 6 of cold press and 3 hot and 3 cold, and you'd be 3 rough, and you would be set there probably for a year in that size. Put that there for a minute. And then Meeden also do a 50% cotton pad as well. That's half and half. But this isn't a block, it's a pad, so they're separate sheets. And that one's less expensive, but it's good quality. That's an option. And then the same size, 10x7, we have in the same format as the 7x5, and hot, cold, and rough. Then there's another bigger one, which is 12x9. And also, this is big enough for a full landscape, if you wanted to do a full landscape painting. And then, of course, there's the 12x16, which is obviously bigger still. That would be this one here. Hang on. So that's quite a large. Whoops. That's 15x11. Sorry, that's a 15x11. There's also 12x16, which is even bigger still. I was looking for this earlier. I couldn't find it, so that's where it was hiding. So you want to get yourself several of those, and if you want to go for a different brand and one that's perhaps not 100% cotton and a little bit cheaper because of that, then something like Clairefontaine or Bockingford or any one of the American ones, like, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but anyway, you know what I mean. They're all great too. a good quality cellulose paper will not let you down. I don't care what anyone says. You do not need, it's not absolutely vital to paint on cotton, but you can. And you won't be unhappy with cotton paper. Definitely not. Although some cellulose papers, and of course I should mention, and I didn't say this, you do need 140 pound or 300 gram paper. It might say 300 on the front, it might say 140. That's because they're talking grams, or if it says 140, I think it might say that on here. Yeah, this is a 200 gram one, so that's a bit lighter, and that's 95 pound. It could say 300 grams, it would say 140 pounds. So that's the thickness that you need, which is significantly thicker than copy paper, for example, or ordinary sketch paper. And it's a good idea to have a sketchbook too, something really inexpensive you can get from any dollar store. Doesn't have to be anything special. I made this one from some cheap copy paper. And my sketchbooks, on the whole, I tend to scribble in and just try out colours and designs and stuff like that. My sketchbooks are not works of art, but everybody should have something to one side so that they can try out their colours and strokes and things like that. So now we'll talk a little bit about paint and what we have here. I'll do brushes first, just a sec. Tamsin mentioned that she would get a couple of good brushes, and what I use is the Princeton Aqua Elite, which actually, funnily enough, she bought for me for Christmas a couple of years ago. I really like these brushes. They're nice and pointed. They hold plenty of water, and I use them very frequently. They also have another brand or another style called Neptune, which is softer. I quite like that as well. But if I was to say, if there was one brush I would not want to be without at the moment, it would be the Aqua Elite, and a size 4, 8 and 12. It's easy to remember, isn't it? 4, 8 and 12 will, pretty much cover everything that you might want to do. Paint. This is a Kuretake Kansai Tambi paint set, which I have put into a different container because it comes in a cardboard box, which isn't to my particular personal taste, because I need to have my paints around the outside edge of my palette, leaving me space in the middle in which to mix any colours that I'm going to mix. So I got this tray, and I'll put links in the description below to all of these things that I'm using if you're interested. But this set of paints is really the best for many reasons. I wish this had been available when I first started painting in watercolour. It wasn't. This could not be further away from the way I learnt when I started, with the tiny little tubes or the tiny little pans and all the associated problems of colour fade back when things dried and so on. There are 10 really good reasons for these being my recommended paints for beginners. And to go through them quickly, if you look at this selection of paints, all these colours go together. You could take any 3 colours from anywhere in this set and they will work together. They won't make a muddy grey, and they'll give you some kind of a design that you can work with, and that is a fact. They dry the same colour as they are when they're wet, so you don't have to take into consideration a 20% fading, which is one of the things that is the most difficult for new beginners. So that is something I want to really stress, that if you're having problems making your paintings look the way you want them to look, it's because your paints are fading overnight. So try these. Also, they make fantastic washes. They don't have runbacks and back runs and things like that. They're not expensive. They work on cellulose paper. The pans are big and give you lots of space to pick up paint. They can be used transparent, opaque or semi-opaque. They blend perfectly well with traditional watercolour. They're light fast, they're very vivid, and they reproduce well digitally for photos to share online. And they re-wet really quickly. You don't have to pre-wet them. They just go as soon as you touch them with water on your brush. So there's 10 really good reasons why these paints are my go-to for beginners. There are cheaper versions out there than Kuretake, and there are other brands. but these are the ones which are most readily available and I think are most reliable. So anyway, let's get started. We've got some water here. I've got a couple of big jars of water like this, handy, just out of sight of the camera. I've got a piece of toweling, but it could just as easily be a piece of paper towel. And I'm going to put my paints to one side, organise myself here a little bit. I'll put these over here. And then what I have to do now is decide what size painting I'm going to do and choose from one of my blocks. Okay, so here's a tip. I'm going to be doing this painting wet in wet, and that means I have to make the paper wet all over. And so what I'm going to do is, instead of using a brush, which at the end of the day, to be quite honest, is not that good for the brush if you're going to use this like a house painting brush and, you know, go all over the paper. So instead, I'm going to use a sponge. And this is a piece of natural sponge, which you can buy from Amazon. They have them in little bags full of different shapes and sizes. And I'm just going to pretend I'm having a shower quickly. And I'm just going to brush with the sponge, or to sponge with the sponge, water all over this piece of paper. Now this format of the block, which is glued all the way around, is something that I certainly didn't have when I first started painting half a century ago. We used to have to soak our paper and then fix it to a board using brown paper tape and wait for it to dry, and then we could use it. This is such a boon to be able to do a painting like this straight onto a piece of stretched paper, you know, and honestly, the liberation, there's only one thing that comes close to being as liberating as that, in my view, and that is the use of these Kuretake paints, which are equally as liberating. And I can't make up my mind actually whether to paint in browns or whether to paint in blues. I'm sort of leaning towards the blues actually. There's such a good range of blues in this set here. Everything from cerulean, cobalt, ultramarine, Prussian blue, indigo, blue-grey, imperial violet, cobalt violet, turquoise, ultramarine light, and horizon blue. I mean, that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 blues. And, you know, I was taught all those years ago, you don't need all those blues. You only need 2, maybe 3. And that would be ultramarine, Windsor blue, which is like phthalo blue, and cobalt blue or cerulean. And that's all you needed. And you would be, if you wanted to have any of these other colors, you had to mix. So if you wanted something like indigo, you weren't allowed to have indigo in your palette because that might muddy your colours. So if you wanted to have indigo, you had to mix it yourself, and that's basically black and a couple of blues. So whatever you had. Trust me, it was much more frustrating than it is now. So anyway, this is a different, entirely different way of painting, a completely different way of painting. Now you can see I'm just picking up some paint here. I'll just test it in the center here. And this is a lightish kind of blue. This is cobalt blue. And I'm picking up a fair amount, making it nice and wet. And I'm going to start at the top right hand here. And I'm just going to paint in and let the paint do whatever it wants to do when it hits the paper. And we'll take that hair out. That's one problem with having so many animals. They do tend to get into all of your work. So that's that. I have nothing in mind other than I'm going to try to create a mixture of blues here on my paper. So this is ultramarine, which is very similar, has to be said. Probably got a bit of cobalt still in my brush there. But you'll see that the ultramarine is a little bit less greenish. And then I'm going to try to find some Prussian blue, and we'll put some of that in. And it doesn't matter if it overlaps. In fact, we probably want it to overlap. And let's go for some blue-grey down here. And we could have some nice dark Prussian blue. We could have cobalt violet. What about that? That doesn't really look very violet, does it? It almost looks like a blue. And then over this side, I think I'm going to pick up some of the slightly more opaque colours. And we just blend it a little bit so that it covers the whole paper nice and evenly. This is indigo, getting quite low on some of these paints. So there we are. We've got paint all over the paper there, so now that can dry a little bit. And if you, what we're going to do when that's dry is going to paint on top of it. If you want to create some texture, some more texture here, there's a couple of things you could do. You could sprinkle some salt on there, which I will do because we're only playing. So this is just ordinary fine kitchen salt. You can use the coarse grain if you want. So we'll just put a little bit of that on, and that will break up the texture a bit. And you can see it's sucking up the paint because it's very hydrophilic. Yes, it likes water. So it's sucking that up. And another thing we could do is we could drip a few drops. So just wet your brush. Don't shake all the water off, but just tap, holding it over the paper, and then you'll get some more shapes occurring as the water goes into the paper, into the paint, and pushes it back. Okay, so we'll let that do its thing, and then when it's dry, we can add more colour. You could add more colour at this point, actually. I might just drop in a bit more blue in the corners, perhaps. But probably not too much, maybe a little bit here. So I'll probably put the hairdryer on that just to make it happen a bit more quickly. I want some more blue-grey there. But we need some areas to be lighter and some areas to be darker. That just gives us a second, a kind of starting point for the second stage. Okay, so that's dry now, and I'm going to just scratch off the salt. You don't want to rub it off with your fingers really, because firstly it might hurt, and secondly you're bound to leave a bit of grease behind, so it's probably best to grab an old card of some sort, credit card or whatever, bank card, and then we'll get rid of that. And we do have quite a lot of nice texture going on. This block here has separated halfway down because it changes here from cold press to hot. So that's not ideal, actually. It's an experiment that Meaden were trying out, whereby they had more than one type of paper in one block. But I don't think I really like that all that much. So what are we going to do now? That is a very good question. There are several things that you could do with this background, and one is you could put in a branch of leaves to start with, and then you could work your doodles and things like that around it. But another thing that you could do, which I think I'm going to do today because I haven't really done that before, is I'm going to pick up some different shades of blue, like for example this blue-grey, And I'm going to paint, you know, it's starting to be a bit spring-like around here, so starting to think about eggs. And I'm going to try to see where I have a circle or an oval in this painting, and I'm just going to put paint in to that shape. And I'm going to vary the different colours. We might use any of these blues. Where can I see another one? I think there's another one here. And they can be quite big or quite small. What's this colour? Turquoise. We could put one here. And the thing is, they'll have a little bit of a pattern on them when they dry, showing through from underneath. And then we can elaborate that a bit. So we want another one here. You could use two colours. We could go back to this one, for example, and we could put a darker area near the bottom, and we can just let that bleed out. Perhaps we might want to put something in the middle of that one. And this one also could have something around one edge. Okay, and then we might want to consider using some other colours. I mean, you could, there's this grey here, so we could try and find grey. I know there's black here, that'll do. So just very pale black makes grey, doesn't it? And then maybe we'll put a little bit of blue in as well. And let's go for some, what they call horizon blue here. We'll do a half circle there, maybe with a bit of grey down the bottom. And here we've got a sort of purple blob. So I'm going to put something quite dark on top of there. Let's put two. And those kinds of colours, those dark ones, are going to be very good for putting gold on top. And you just carry on doing this until you feel you've done enough. Whenever that seems to be the case. And okay, I might put a few small ones. Okay, and now I need to dry that, I think. Right, that's now dry. So what we're going to do is the fun bit now. We're going to do the embellishments. And I've got here a Molotov One for All acrylic twin. It has a thin end. If you can get the lid off. There we are. That's a nice thin end here. And I think it tells you that it is 1.5 millimeters. And at the other end, it's a fat one, which is 4 millimeters. So you've got two options there. And this one is what you might call a soft white. It's not bright white. It's a kind of almost like a well, it's called Naturweiß, natural white. And then I've got, which is kind of like an ivory, pale ivory. This is an Artex acrylic liner. This is black. I hope that's going to work. Yes, does nice round dots. I did have the white one, but it dried, well, it didn't dry up. I used it up. And then I've got a little gold liner here. This is a Slicky from Pentel. It's very fine, very small, but it does a nice line and it's quite bright gold. And then I've got my gold paints here. These are, I don't know who, they could be Kuretake. It could be any one of several different makes. To be quite honest, I don't think there's much to tell them apart, to be quite honest. But I think this is Kuretake. I'm not sure. It's got nothing on the box. And I don't think there's anything underneath either. It looks like Kuretake, yes. I think I can turn it upside down. It'll drip on my hand, but that looks like made in Japan. It probably says Kuretake on there in Japanese. I don't know. Right, let's get on with it then. These kind of egg shapes, these sort of Easter eggy kind of shapes, are going to be embellished. And it's always difficult to know where to start, really. I think possibly some dots perhaps is the easiest thing. We'll start with some small dots, perhaps. Perhaps we'll just put some small dots on some of these little ones here. Try to make something relatively round. If you can just overcome your hesitation, you know, that's the thing, really. Don't try to do it perfectly, because there's no need. There is no such thing as perfect. And if you're anything like me, when you start doing something like this, you find that you want to put dots all over everything. So beware. You might become addicted to putting dots in circles. Quite fun. Now this one, I think I'm going to do a spiral. There we are. Maybe we'll do something like that here too. And just let your imagination take you wherever it wants to go. Don't try to plan it out. The most you want to do is plan to say, oh, I think I'll do 6 or 7 with this pen, and then I'll move to something else. Okay, so I've basically embellished all of the small ones. And if you do something like that, like you've got the little lines on the outside and then the row of dots and then a circle. This one, I've got the circle, the lines and the dots in the opposite direction. And on this one, we could just do fewer like that, maybe just a dot in the middle. And I tell you what, on these, I'll do something slightly different. I'll go to the fat one and we'll do some bigger dots. And this one can have, whoops, a big one in the middle. Try not to touch that. So we'll put that aside for the minute. And then perhaps we'll go to black. And what should we do with the black? We could, actually, I'll save the black because I'll come into that later. I'm going to go to the gold. This is yellow gold, the one I'm picking up here. And I'm going to attempt, let's use a little bit more water. I think I'll go all the way around on this one. When that's dry, I might put a black dot in the middle. And another thing we can do with the gold is, where we've got a nice background like this, we can take our slicky gold and we can just follow that line all the way around. And maybe we'll put some little white dots on the inside, just very light. I'm touching only slightly. You can get a smaller dot if you touch very lightly, so put those on the inside. And then I'm going to go back again to my yellow gold with the brush, and I'm going to try sort of copy that line a little bit around the outside of that. And then what else could we do? We could do the line in white. Same thing. Like that. And maybe and then perhaps what shall we do next? Maybe black. Should we put some black? Not sure about that. Sometimes you will, regret, but you just have to go with the flow. And hope that you can make something of it. So I'm going to add gold to those black lines, which I don't like. And I'm hoping that when that dries, if nothing else, we'll be able to put some more gold on top. So we'll leave that like that, let that do whatever it wants to do. It might work, actually. It might work. And then I've got some silver here. Let's go up here and do some silver. Parallel lines. Okay. And let's go back to the gold. Let's try this one. There we are. And some of this red gold perhaps again. If I divide this one in half. And well, this can be quite a relaxing occupation. And because you're not trying to do anything specific, I remember a long time ago, painting became anything other than relaxing, because I would say, oh, I need to paint a bird and it has to look like a bird. This is when I had an eBay shop and I was trying to produce work that people would pay for and buy. And if ever there's anything soul destroying, that has to be it. Because, yeah. Anyway, this is completely different because you're just doing something for your own pleasure. And it doesn't matter what it looks like in the end. It's just a break from the trauma that is life today. Five dots. Maybe this one could have multiple spirals, perhaps. There we are. And then I think I'm going to pick up some indigo and black to give me a really dark blue. And then I think I might put in some leaves. And if you're not confident with painting leaves, because you've never really done it before, this is a very good place to start, isn't it? And don't expect them to be perfect. Mine never are. But I just felt that this needed something nature-based. So leaves is as good as it gets. And we probably need some stems, and I probably need to find a black pen for that to do some stems. Oh, actually that one needs another one there. Maybe another one there. So we'll find a black pen, Kuretake black pen perhaps, and we'll just I know I use a lot of Kuretake products, but I am not sponsored by them. I just like their things. Okay, I think that's probably going to be enough. So the next thing to do then is to dry it, and we'll take off the tape and see what we've created. Okay, so this is Meaden masking tape, which always does a pretty good job. Something like this would make a nice little card. You probably would want to try to avoid making a mistake in the middle like I did there, but chances are nobody would notice, only you. So there we are. That gives us a nice clean edge, and it does make a big difference. So there we are. That's the final painting. I hope you enjoyed watching me create that. If you're new to watercolor this year, hopefully you'll have got some useful tips and hints out of this little video. And if you're not, and you've been painting for a while, it's a lovely subject for you to relax to on a Sunday afternoon. So I'll let you go, and I'll see you again soon. Bye everybody. Bye bye.